up from a dream, a total whirlwind of bizarre images, maybe intense feelings, and you just find yourself thinking, what on earth did that mean? Like,
Wow.
beyond the weird plot twists, is it actually telling us anything real about ourselves?
That's a huge question, isn't it? And it's one people have been grappling with for, well, forever, basically. For centuries, we've wrestled with what dreams are. Are they just, random static from a sleeping brain? Or is there maybe a hidden language, some deeper meaning tucked away in those nightly stories?
Well, today, that's exactly what we're doing, taking a deep dive into the groundbreaking, sometimes, yeah, controversial work of Sigmund Freud, specifically his insights from dream psychology. We're kind of going on a journey, right, into the hidden landscape of your own mind, trying to figure out what your dreams are really trying to tell you.
Right. And our mission here is to try and unpack some pretty complex psychoanalytic ideas, but in a way that's hopefully clear and easy to grasp. We want to reveal some surprising facts, maybe some profound insights about why we dream and what those dreams genuinely mean. Think of it as a bit of a shortcut to understanding yourself better. You might get those aha moments, about the powerful forces working away beneath the surface of your consciousness.
Okay, and just so everyone knows where we're coming from, the material for this deep dive is directly from an authorized English translation of Freud's dream psychology.
Hmm.
It also has an introduction by Andre Treatham, which is helpful. This text is key because it simplifies Freud's really extensive original work, makes his big ideas more accessible for a wider audience, which is, well, perfect for what we're trying to do today.
Yeah.
Setting the stage, challenging old ideas, and unveiling a new science. So before Freud really entered the picture, what was the general thinking about dreams? It sounds like there was a big shift in how people saw them.
Oh, absolutely. A huge shift. In what Freud called the pre-scientific days, people were pretty certain about dreams. They saw them as powerful messages, from higher powers. Could be divine, could be demonic. But the key thing was, everyone firmly believed dreams had meaning. The question wasn't if, but what the meaning was. Prophecies, warnings, guidance, that sort of thing.
Right, so a very spiritual, almost mystical view. But then with the rise of modern science, that changed, didn't it?
It really did. As scientific thinking took hold, especially in the medical world, that ancient view got pushed aside, largely dismissed. The main medical view, championed by people like Binns, basically saw dreams as just physical processes.
Yeah.
Like incoherent noise from a sleeping brain. Binns famously said they were always useless, frequently morbid. He compared them to just random notes being hit on a piano. Physiological static, essentially.
Okay, so science kind of threw out thousands of years of belief in meaningful dreams, just called it superstition. But this is where Freud comes in and completely flips that script, right?
This is really the crucial point. Freud, and it seems even to his own surprise, discovered that the popular view, the so-called superstitious one, the one that always insisted dreams had meaning, was actually closer to the truth than the dismissive, supposedly scientific medical view. That a total radical turnaround of the scientific consensus at the time, it showed that maybe common human intuition had actually been more on track in this area than the established medical thinking.
That's amazing. So how did he get to that conclusion, especially when it completely went against the scientific grain?
Well, it definitely wasn't just a hunch. Freud's approach was pretty revolutionary for psychology back then. He acted almost like a statistician of the psyche.
Hmm.
He meticulously looked at thousands and thousands of dreams, compared them really carefully with detailed case histories from his patients. He let the facts 1,000 times, as the text says, speak to him. He just gathered data without knowing where it would lead, ready to accept whatever conclusions the evidence pointed to, no matter how strange they seemed.
That sounds incredibly empirical, really data-driven, very modern, actually, but totally new for psychology then.
It really was. Before Freud, psychologists often built these, what Buhler called attractive hypotheses in autistic ways, which basically means they came up with fancy theories without much solid evidence and then tried to kind of jam reality into fitting them. Freud's method was the complete opposite. Let the data guide you, even if it leads somewhere uncomfortable or unexpected.
Okay, given how new and, well, countercultural this was, I bet he faced a lot of pushback, especially using a term like dream interpretation.
Oh, huge resistance, yeah. The term dream interpretation itself just had these unpleasant, unscientific associations for people. It made them think of childish, superstitious notions, those old, discredited dream books everyone scoffed at.
Yeah.
So that association meant the conservative medical world initially just dismissed Freud as a crank. They often just ridiculed his ideas without even really looking at his work.
And it sounds like there was maybe a deeper reason for that pushback, too. You mentioned dreams revealing unpleasant biological truths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Freud argued that a lot of people just do not dare to face the facts revealed by dream study. Because dreams, he found, tell us many an unpleasant biological truth about ourselves. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? To confront those hidden parts, those repressed desires, those conflicts that kind of bubble up in the pellucid atmosphere of dream investigation. It strips away the self-deception we often kind of wrap ourselves in.
But even with all that initial scorn and, later people like Jung and Adler adding their own ideas, Freud's work obviously lasted. It's still seen as foundational, right?
Totally foundational. Freud is undeniably the father of modern abnormal psychology. His core wish fulfillment theory was the original foundation for psychoanalysis. It's considered, as the text puts it, indestructible as Harvey's statement as to the circulation of the blood. And psychoanalysis, which grew directly from his work, completely revolutionized how we diagnose and treat mental issues. It forced doctors to rethink their views on almost every kind of disease. It wasn't just a theory, it was a whole new way of seeing the human mind.
And that new way of seeing, that psychoanalytic lens, it really opened up this huge uncharted territory in psychology.
Precisely. Freud's work opened up what he called the royal road into the unconscious. This vast internal landscape that had never been charted because, well, academic philosophers had basically decided beforehand that it couldn't be charted, like how ancient map makers would just write, here there are lions in the blank spots. But Freud didn't find lions there. He found man himself and the record of all his life and of his struggle with reality.
And this specific book we're using, Dream Psychology, it was meant to make that royal road a bit easier to travel for everyone, wasn't it?
That was the idea. Freud knew his original work was incredibly dense, really detailed, almost like a legal document. Pretty tough for the average person to get through. So he took the essential discoveries from that gigantic work. Dream Psychology is meant to be a simple, compact manual. It's designed to make his revolutionary system understandable for beginners, sort of removing any excuse for not knowing about this really transformative way of understanding psychology. 2. Unpacking the meaning. Dreams as wish fulfillments.
Okay, so let's try and boil it down. If we cut through all the complexity and get right to the heart of Freud's insight about dreams, what's the main thing for us to take away?
Well, the core insight is really twofold. First, Freud showed there's a constant connection between some part of every single dream and a detail from the dreamer's waking life just before the dream. So that right away gets rid of the idea that dreams are just purely random nonsense coming from nowhere.
Right.
They're tied to our daily lives.
Right, they're connected to reality. And the second part, the even bigger idea.
The second, and probably the most revolutionary finding, was his wish hypothesis. After studying just countless lives, looking at all these seemingly tiny details, Freud concluded that there was in every dream the attempted or successful gratification of some wish, conscious or unconscious. That's the absolute cornerstone of his theory. Dreams, deep down, are about fulfilling wishes.
Wow. That's a huge claim. Dreams are always wish fulfillments. Where did he see the clearest proof for that? Because, let's face it, adult dreams can seem so bizarre and confusing.
Yeah, adult dreams get complicated. But the clearest examples, the real blueprint for seeing wish fulfillment in action, comes from the dreams of children. Their dreams are often simply and undisguisedly realizations of wishes. Why? Because kids haven't really built up all the complex psychological defenses and distortions that adults have. Their wishes are usually more direct, less hidden, or repressed.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Can you give us some examples of these straightforward kid dreams?
Sure. There's a great one about a 19-month-old girl. She'd eaten too many strawberries, got sick, and wasn't allowed food for a day. During the night, her parents heard her calling out her own name and then saying, "Tallberry, eggs, pap." She was literally dreaming of eating the very food she wanted but couldn't have. Another one, a little boy, Herman, 22 months old. He was only allowed one cherry from a basket the day before. He woke up shouting, "Herman, eating up all the cherries." A direct wish for more cherries, plain and simple.
Huh. It's like their dreams just pick up right where their daytime wishes got cut off. There's no filter at all.
Exactly. No filter. Or think about the 5.5-year-old boy who was disappointed because he didn't get to the top of the Dachstein mountain during a walk. What did he dream? He dreamt he had ascended the Dachstein. The dream just gave him what the day didn't. So what these simple dreams show us is just how direct our wishes are before all the complexities of adult life kick in. It's like a raw blueprint. Dreams directly satisfy wishes excited during the day which remain unrealized.
Okay, so if kids' dreams are that clear, what happens as we get older? Why do adult dreams seem so much more uh, disguised, hidden?
Well, adult dreams are rarely as simple as the dreams of children. They often cover another meaning, beyond just the obvious wish fulfillment. While kids' dreams are direct wish fulfillments, adult dreams tend to be concealed realizations of repressed desires. The complexity comes in because those raw, often unacceptable wishes from our unconscious have to be twisted, distorted, disguised so they can sneak past our internal censor and make it into our awareness, even while we're sleeping. This is why we end up with dreams that might look sensible on the surface, but their real meaning is buried deep down. 3. The dream's hidden language, mechanisms of distortion.
All right, but adult dreams are so heavily disguised. How on earth do we figure out what they actually mean? This is where Freud's famous analysis method comes in, right? Free association.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is where free association becomes crucial. The basic method is you take any piece of the dream, an image, a word, a feeling, whatever, and you ask the dreamer for their unbidden associations. The key instruction is to just say whatever comes into your mind, no matter how random, embarrassing, or, totally irrelevant it seems. The whole point is to try and bypass that internal self-criticism that usually filters our thoughts when we're awake.
Okay, trying to get past the internal editor. And what does doing that reveal about the dream itself? How does the remembered dream differ from the thoughts behind it?
It reveals this huge gap between the dream content, that's the stuff you actually remember, which is often kind of passionless, disconnected, and unintelligible, and the underlying dream thoughts or the latent content. These hidden thoughts, once you uncover them through analysis, are usually full of intense and well-grounded emotions. They're logically bound together. So the dream you remember is really just a sort of substitution for these deeper emotional, logical trains of thought that the analysis brings out. It's like a coded message.
A coded message. Okay, so what are the main ways the dream codes or twists these underlying thoughts? What are these mechanisms?
Freud identified several key mechanisms of the dream work. The first one, and maybe the most striking, is condensation.
Condensation. Okay, so like a lot of stuff gets jammed together, a psychic squishing.
Exactly. It's an extraordinary compression. Multiple thoughts, different impressions, maybe various events from your life, all get fused into a single dream element or scene. He used the analogy of Francis Galton's composite photographs, where you layer multiple faces on top of each other. The common features stand out, and the different details blur or cancel out. This helps explain that peculiar vagueness you sometimes get in dreams, or why a person in your dream might seem like a blend of several people or represent multiple ideas at once.
Right, so one dream image could stand for many things simultaneously. Okay, what's the next mechanism?
The second key one is displacement. This is sometimes called the transvaluation of psychical values. What happens here is that the emotional intensity, the real importance of the original hidden dream thoughts, gets shifted onto other elements in the remembered dream. Often things that seem minor, irrelevant, or just remote. This process is a huge contributor to concealment of the dream's meaning. It makes it really hard to see the connection between the dream you remember and the thoughts that actually generated it.
Okay, so the really significant feeling or idea is hiding behind something that looks unimportant. Or maybe it's just in the background of the dream.
Precisely. For instance, Freud analyzed one of his own dreams, where the main action seemed to be a woman making advances. That was the foreground. But the analysis showed that the real chief interest behind the dream, the core idea, was a desire to enjoy disinterested love which shall cost nothing. And this was only hinted at by things like the woman having beautiful eyes and the fact that spinach was served in the dream. The surface scene felt important, but the real emotional weight was attached to these other seemingly minor details. Quite sneaky.
It is clever. What else is going on in this dream work?
Well, there's also dramatization. This is basically the dream work turning abstract thoughts and complex feelings, this psychical complex, into sensory images, into scenes, sometimes even conversations. It tends to grab only the essential content of the thoughts and often loses the logical chains connecting them. That's why analysis is needed to put those connections back together, connections the dream deliberately broke.
And then there are those dreams that are just completely absurd.
Right.
They make zero logical sense. Is there a point to that absurdity?
Well, absolutely. When a dream seems openly absurd or has some obvious paradox in it, Freud says it's so of purpose. That blatant disregard for logic isn't just random noise. It actually expresses a part of the intellectual content of the dream ideas. Specifically, absurdity in the dream often represents feelings of disagreement, scorn, disdain in the underlying thoughts. It's a coded way of expressing criticism or rejection. Like the example of the businessman dreaming he was ruined by an attack from Guka, who died in 1832. The absurdity masked the dreamer's real contempt for a young book reviewer and an old professor he thought was senile. The absurdity was a shield for some pretty harsh judgments.
So the absurdity kind of protects the dreamer from having to face their own critical or contemptuous thoughts directly. It really sounds like there's some kind of internal gatekeeper managing all this.
Yes, and that brings us neatly to the role of the censor. Freud conceptualized the censor as this metaphorical guardian standing between our unconscious thoughts and our conscious awareness. It only passes what pleases it, keeping back everything else. Now, during sleep, the censor is a bit off guard. Its vigilance is lowered, which allows some of this repressed stuff to bubble up. But it still insists on certain alterations to make the material less shocking or unacceptable. The dream itself is therefore a compromise. It's a compromise between the unconscious wish pushing for expression and the censor demanding disguise. This whole process of dream distortion is the deed of the dream work, and displacement is a key tool used to disguise this object so it can slip past that watchful censor. 4. Case studies in disguise. Analyzing complex dreams.
Okay, so we have these mechanisms: condensation, displacement, the censor demanding disguise. But what about those dreams that just seem to fly completely in the face of the wish fulfillment idea? You know, the ones that are genuinely painful or scary or seem to be about things we absolutely don't wish for. These counter-wish dreams, as Freud called them. How do they fit?
That's a really common and valid point people raise. Freud argues, though, that even these dreams are wish fulfillments. The wish is just very, very well hidden. It might manifest as its opposite or serve some really complex underlying purpose. The painful or unpleasant feeling you remember from the dream is often just a mask, a facade for a hidden wish.
So even if the dream feels bad, there's a wish driving it somewhere underneath. Can you give us an example? Maybe that supper dream you mentioned?
Right, the supper dream. So a patient dreams she wants to host a supper, but she can't. The shops are all closed, the phone's not working. On the surface, it looks like an unfulfilled wish, right? A frustration. But when you dig into it with analysis, her husband was trying to lose weight, and her friend, who she was secretly quite jealous of because her husband praised her figure, actually wanted to gain weight. So the patient's hidden wish was not to help her friend gain weight and become potentially more attractive to her husband. The dream fulfills this negative wish by making it impossible to host the supper. It blocks her friend's goal.
Whoa, that's a clever twist. The wish is to stop something from happening, not necessarily to make something happen. Okay, what about a dream that seems truly awful, like the dead nephew dream? How could that possibly be a wish?
The dead nephew dream is a powerful example. A young woman dreams her favorite nephew, Charles, is dead. The dream even replicates the exact scene of her other nephew, Otto's, actual death. It seems incredibly morbid, totally anti-wish. However, at Otto's funeral, she had briefly reconnected with a man she was deeply in love with, but couldn't be with because her family, specifically her sister, interfered. The dream, analysis revealed, was actually an impatience dream. It fulfilled her deeply repressed, powerful wish to see this man again. She was anticipating an upcoming concert where she knew she would see him. The very sad, even morbid context of the dream served as a perfect disguise for this intense, forbidden longing. It made the wish acceptable to the censor. The sadness was a cover for desire.
Wow, the sadness was a cloak for longing. Okay, now, anxiety dreams, those feel undeniably bad, terrifying even. How can they possibly be wish fulfillments?
Yeah, anxiety dreams feel awful. But Freud argued they are still, fundamentally, wish fulfillments. The fear you feel is only superficially attached to the idea in the dream you remember. His theory was that neurotic anxiety, and therefore the anxiety in dreams, actually comes from libido, from sexual energy, which has been turned away from its object and has not succeeded in being applied. Basically, it's repressed sexual energy that gets transformed into fear. So the underlying content of anxiety dreams is almost always, according to Freud, of a sexual nature.
Sexual energy turning into fear. Can you give an example of an anxiety dream where analysis revealed that sexual root?
Well, Freud used one of his own childhood dreams, the bird-beaked figures dream. He dreamt of these strange figures with bird beaks carrying his mother, who strangely had his grandfather's face, who snored, into a room. He woke up terrified, crying. Through self-analysis later, he concluded the anxiety came from an obscure, obviously sexual desire linked to a vulgar German word for sexual intercourse, all mixed up with his childhood fears about his mother dying. Crucially, he felt the anxiety came first, before the interpretation of his mother dying. It showed how the raw feeling, the fear, shaped the terrifying images, transforming an underlying sexual impulse.
That's really interesting. The feeling shapes the image, not the other way around. What about night terrors, pavor nocturnus? Are they connected too?
Yes, definitely. Night terrors are also seen as expressions of these incomprehensible and rejected sexual feelings. When those feelings become too intense, they get converted into raw anxiety. The text gives this really vivid example of a 13-year-old boy who was tormented by visions of the devil shouting, "Now we have you." And there was even a sulfur smell. He later confessed that this happened when he felt a tickling of the genitals, and he felt so disturbed he wanted to throw himself out the window. But the doctors at the time, trapped in what Freud called medical mythology, completely missed the sexual connection. They diagnosed him with cerebral anemia, basically, not enough blood to the brain. It really shows how important the psychoanalytic view can be for understanding experiences that otherwise seem completely bizarre or terrifying. V, the universal code. Symbolism in dreams.
Okay, so it really seems like a lot of these complex dreams, especially the anxiety ones, the disguised ones, often boil down to something sexual at their root. Is that like a general principle in Freudian dream theory?
It's a very central principle, yes. Freud concluded that a majority of the dreams of adults treat of sexual material and give expression to erotic wishes. Why? Because the sex impulse, with all its different components, is the part of ourselves that faces the most suppression from the time of childhood onwards. So dreams, needing to smuggle this often repressed sexual content past the censor, have to make it look innocently asexual. They use illusions, suggestions, and similar indirect means, which are often deprived of direct understanding. And this is exactly where symbolism becomes so important.
Right, so symbols are the dream's secret code for talking about sex without actually talking about sex, so the censor doesn't block it. Are these symbols the same for everyone? Universal?
Well, it's a mix. Freud talked about symbols of universal circulation, ones that seem common across different languages and cultures. But there are also symbols with a narrowest individual significance, unique to that one person's experiences and thoughts. And here's a really crucial point. Symbolism isn't just a dream thing. Freud said it's not peculiar to the dream, but rather to unconscious thinking, particularly that of the masses, unquote. You find the same kinds of symbols in folklore, in the myths, legends, and manners of speech, in the proverbial sayings, and in the current witticisms of a nation. That helps explain why these symbols work in dreams. They tap into this deep, shared well of unconscious imagery and cultural understanding.
Okay, so it's not like those old dream dictionaries then, where X always means Y.
No, definitely not. Freud explicitly warned against creating a new, fixed dream book, even though the temptation is there. Dream analysis always still needs the dreamer's own associations. A symbol might be literal in one dream and symbolic in another, and the individual context is everything. Knowing the common symbols is helpful. It gives you a starting point, but it's not a substitute for exploring the dreamer's unique connections to that symbol.
Got it. Super important caveat. But with that in mind, can you share some of the most common sexual symbols Freud identified? This is where it gets really fascinating.
Sure, some common ones include: for parents, seeing an emperor and empress, or a king and queen, almost always points to the dreamer's parents, with the dreamer often being the prince or princess. For male genitals, symbols are often all elongated objects, sticks, tree trunks, and umbrellas. The umbrella especially because opening it resembles an erection. Also, all elongated and sharp weapons, knives, daggers, and pikes. Even things like nail files, complex machines, neckties, and more recently, flying machines. For female genitals, common symbols are things that enclose a space: little cases, boxes, caskets, closets, and stoves. Also, tables, especially set tables, boards, and certain kinds of landscapes, like those with bridges or with wooded mountains or buildings like churches or chapels. And the sexual act itself is frequently symbolized by climbing staircases, ladders, flights of stairs, going up or down. Also, rhythmic actions or things like being run over.
Wow, that really reframes how you might look at seemingly ordinary dream images. Can you give us a few more specific dream examples to see this symbolism at work?
Absolutely. Consider the hat dream, from a woman suffering from agoraphobia, fear of open spaces. She dreamt of a straw hat, kind of specific, raised middle part, sides hanging down unevenly. Analysis connected the hat's shape directly to the male genitals. Her fear of going out in the street was linked to a hidden wish for a man with a virile genital, suggesting her husband's perceived inadequacy. Her initial denial, followed by later confirmation about her husband's anatomy, really seemed to support the symbolic interpretation. The dream wasn't really about a hat at all.
So a simple object becomes this loaded personal symbol. Okay, what about the dream with the little one?
Ah yes, the little one, run-over dream. A mother dreams her daughter, whom she'd sent away, is walking on train track and gets run over, bones crackling, grim stuff. Here, little one often symbolizes the genitals, could be male or female, and being run over, as we mentioned, is a common symbol for sexual intercourse. The dream was interpreted as expressing the patient's anger towards her own strict mother for stifling her sexuality, possibly mixed with childhood jealousy related to her father. The disturbing image hit a complex story about sex, repression, and family.
It's amazing how much gets packed into these symbolic scenes. And the stairway dream.
The stairway dream, reported by AutoRank, is quite direct. A man dreams he's running downstairs after a girl, performs a sexual act right there on the stairs, sees some pictures of women, and then wakes up from a nocturnal emission, a wet dream. The rapid running down the stairs, which he associated with sliding down banisters as a kid, represented sexual excitement. The stairs themselves symbolized coitus. The pictures were linked to women, and possibly a complex about prostitution. It shows how even an explicitly sexual dream can still use symbols like stairs to represent the act itself, layering meaning onto the event. 6. The unconscious engine. Why we dream.
Okay, we talked about what dreams mean, these disguised wish fulfillments, and how they disguise that meaning with condensation, displacement, symbolism. But the really big question tying it all together is, why do we even dream in the first place? What's the fundamental engine driving this whole nightly drama?
Right, and this is where Freud makes another crucial distinction. He says that while those day remnants, the unfinished business from the day, conscious wishes we didn't fulfill, recent impressions, while those things do show up in dreams, they aren't the main source of power. They aren't the primary inciter. They play a role, definitely, but they aren't what really makes the dream happen.
Okay, so if it's not just leftover stuff from yesterday, what is it? What's the real fuel for the dream?
Freud is very clear on this. He insists that the motive power needed by the dream comes invariably and indisputably from a wish from the unconscious. He uses this great metaphor. The unconscious wish is the capitalist providing the funds. The thought or impression from the day is just the contractor who has an idea but needs that capital to actually build something to make the dream happen. And these unconscious wishes, they're always active and ready for expression. They're like these immortal wishes from the unconscious, almost like legendary titans, powerful ancient forces. And crucially, they're almost always of an infantile origin.
Infantile origin. So it's these really deep-seated wishes from childhood, buried way down in the unconscious, that are the real drivers. But if they're repressed, how do they even get out? How do they surface in a dream?
That happens through a mechanism Freud called transference. The idea is that an unconscious idea, as such, is altogether incapable of entering into the foreconscious, the waiting room just outside conscious awareness. It can only exert influence by linking up with, latching onto, a harmless, neutral idea that's already in the foreconscious. It then transfers its intensity onto that harmless idea and uses it as a disguise, allowing itself to be concealed. This actually explains why dreams often grab onto the most indifferent or recent impressions from the day. These things are perfect disguises because they're free from associations that might alert the sensor. They have least to fear from the resisting sensor, making them ideal vehicles for carrying those powerful, repressed unconscious wishes.
Wow, that's a really clever strategy for the unconscious. Okay, but then what's the actual point of the dream? What's its main job? Is it just about letting these repressed wishes have a little outburst?
Well, here's another counterintuitive twist. Freud argues the dream is not primarily a disturber of sleep. Quite the opposite. It strives to guard sleep. The dream acts like a kind of psychological safety valve. It allows some of that pent-up psychic energy from the repressed wish to be discharged, but in a disguised, hallucinatory way that prevents the dreamer from actually waking up.
Wait, that seems backwards. Don't bad dreams wake you up?
Sometimes they do, if the wish is too strong or the disguise isn't good enough. But the function is subtle. Freud tells this charming little story. Imagine a bad boy who's woken up with his parents belling, "I want the rhinoceros." His wish is just too strong, it breaks through. But a really good boy, instead of waking everyone up, would simply dream he was playing with a rhinoceros. The dream realizes his desire, hallucinates the fulfillment, and because it is believed during sleep, the dream effectively removes the desire and makes sleep possible. It satisfies the wish just enough to let sleep continue. It's a compromise.
Compromise. Between what exactly?
It's a compromise between the unconscious wish demanding release, psychical release for the wish, and the conscious or foreconscious mind's desire to keep sleeping, assuring the continuance of the sleep. It's like our ego, our conscious self, kind of plays along during sleep. It treats the dream images as real, basically saying, "Quite right, you got your rhinoceros, but let me sleep." Freud compares the dream to a conscientious night watchman. The watchman first tries to quiet down any disturbances to keep the townspeople, the dreamer, asleep. Only if the disturbance gets really serious like a fire will he wake them up. That's why intense anxiety dreams can wake us up. But the dream's primary job is actually to keep us asleep by managing those internal disturbances. Two modes of mind, primary and secondary processes.
Okay, this picture is getting really complex. The unconscious is the capitalist driving the dream work distorts the wish, and the whole thing is trying to keep us asleep. It really sounds like our minds operate in fundamentally different ways at different times. Freud talks about primary and secondary processes, right? What's the difference?
Yes, this is absolutely fundamental to his model, this dual nature of mental activity. The primary process is the older, more primitive way the mind works. Its main goal is immediate discharge of excitement. It wants to achieve what Freud called a perception identity. Basically, it tries to hallucinate the thing desires right now. Think of a tiny baby who's hungry. The primary process might just create a mental image of milk, trying to satisfy the need instantly through hallucination, rather than figuring out how to actually get fed. It operates purely on the pleasure principle. Seek pleasure, avoid pain immediately. And it's characterized by this free outflow of quantities of excitement by condensation, by displacement, and a complete disregard for logic, time, or external reality. It is, as Freud put it, the abandoned psychic life of the child.
Right, so it's all impulse, immediate gratification, very illogical. And the secondary process, how is that different?
The secondary process is the more developed, more expedient mode of thinking. It's shaped by bitter practical experience with the real world. It learns to inhibit the full regression, back to that purely hallucinatory primary process. It figures out how to take circuitous paths to actually interact with the world and get needs met realistically. It operates on the reality principle. It understands delaying gratification, tolerating frustration, and achieving thought identity, which means actual thinking, planning, problem solving, rather than just hallucinating. This is our normal waking thought process where we try to be logical, avoid contradictions, and where condensation and displacement are generally suppressed.
Okay, that makes sense. And where does repression fit into these two processes? We keep hearing about repressed wishes.
Repression is key here. It's the process that happens when fulfilling a certain wish, which might have originally produced pleasure, especially in childhood, starts to no longer produce an effective pleasure, but one of pain. Maybe society disapproves, maybe causes conflict. This transformation of effect, this shift from pleasure to pain, is the first step in rejecting that wish through reason or judgment, which is part of the secondary process. The secondary system then tries to occupy the memory or thought associated with that wish in a way that inhibits its discharge, stopping the painful feeling from developing. Anything that escapes this inhibition, that can't be controlled or neutralized by the secondary process, remains repressed. It gets pushed down and becomes inaccessible to normal conscious thought, operating only within the realm of the primary process, mainly in the unconscious. And Freud emphasizes again that the wishes most likely to undergo this repression are the sexual wish feelings from the infantile life, because those are the ones that face the most intense societal pressure and emotional transformation as we grow up.
So dreams are basically the primary process breaking through or bubbling up during sleep when the secondary process is less active.
That's exactly it. Dreams are prime examples of the primary process in action. Those primitive modes of work suppressed during the day. Condensation, displacement, illogical connections, they all participate in the formation of the dream. The dream work is the primary process operating. And Freud made a fascinating connection here. He pointed out that in psychoses like schizophrenia, these same primary process modes of operation reassert themselves, even during waking life. This leads to things like hallucinations, delusions, and a general disconnection from external reality. The person's mental world starts operating much more like a dream. He also saw a complete identity between how dreams are formed and how psychoneurotic symptoms like phobias or obsessions were formed. Hysterical symptoms, he argued, are also wish fulfillments of the unconscious, often representing a compromise between conflicting conscious and unconscious wishes. 8. Mapping the psyche, the unconscious, consciousness, and reality.
Wow, this is a really intricate map of the mind he's drawing. When Freud talks about these different systems, the unconscious, the foreconscious, the conscious we were talking about, like actual places in the brain, different sections.
That's a really important clarification.
Yeah.
No, Freud was clear he wasn't talking about physical locations in the brain. When he uses terms like unconscious or foreconscious and conscious, he's referring to two kinds of processes or modes of emotional discharge. Different ways the mind works, not different places. Think of the sensor again. He compared it to the refraction of rays during their passage into a new medium. It's about how psychic energy or information is transformed as it moves between these different functional systems or states.
Okay, so it's about processes, not places. And he had this really radical idea about the unconscious itself, didn't he? That it's kind of the main event.
Extremely radical for his time, yes. Freud argued that the unconscious must be accepted as the general basis of the psychic life. He saw it as the larger circle, which includes within itself the smaller circle, the conscious. He even went so far as to say, properly speaking, the unconscious is the real psychic. Its true nature, he believed, is just as unknown to us as the reality of the external world. And consciousness gives us just as imperfect a picture of our inner unconscious world as our senses give us of the external world.
The unconscious is the real psychic. That's a mind bender. So what job does consciousness actually do in this model, then, if it's just the small circle?
Consciousness, in Freud's view, functions primarily as a sensory organ. Its job is the perception of psychic qualities. It gets excited by thoughts and feelings becoming conscious, but, and this is key, it's incapable of retaining memory traces. Think of it like your eyes seeing something. The seeing happens now, but the memory isn't stored in your eyeball. Consciousness is like that it perceives, but it doesn't store. It receives input from two directions. From the external world, through our senses, what he called the perception system P, and also from the interior of the apparatus itself, where internal processes, especially shifts in psychic energy, are perceived as the feelings of pleasure and pain.
Okay, so consciousness is like this perceptual screen, and that sensor we keep talking about is always working, always filtering.
Yes, the sensor is pretty much always on duty, according to Freud, and there isn't just one layer. There's a sensor between the unconscious and the foreconscious, and another one between the foreconscious and actual consciousness. This second sensor bars access to consciousness and also controls the entrance to voluntary motility, meaning it controls what thoughts actually lead to actions. It's a double filter system.
A double filter. But sometimes things must slip through, right?
Yeah.
Can the sensor be fooled?
Oh yes, the sensor can be deceived. Freud gives this example of an intelligent and innocent-looking girl who came for analysis. Her appearance was slightly odd. One of her stockings hanging down and two of her waist buttons opened. She described this vague physical feeling, as if something was stuck into it, which moved to and fro and made her tremble. Her mother hadn't noticed anything wrong. But the description, combined with her slightly disheveled look, allowed an unconscious sexual fantasy to slip into consciousness in a disguised somatic form. The sensor didn't recognize the underlying meaning in the vague physical complaint.
That's quite something. Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the ultimate payoff for studying dreams in this really detailed psychoanalytic way? What do we gain from it?
Freud believed the study of dreams gives us invaluable hints about the structure of our psychic apparatus, insights that philosophy, he felt, hadn't been able to provide. Most importantly, it proves that the suppressed material continues to exist even in the normal person and remains capable of psychic activity. This means all those repressed wishes, fears, memories, they don't just disappear. They stay active deep down, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways we don't usually realize.
And that leads us back to that really powerful statement he made.
Exactly. At any rate, he wrote, the interpretation of dreams is the via regia, the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious and the psychic life. It lets us get familiar with, as he poetically put it, the much raked-up soil from which our virtues proudly arise. It helps us acknowledge the full, complex picture of who we are, including the parts hidden in the shadows. As he famously said to one colleague, we are what we are because we have been what we have been. Our dreams are a living connection to that deep internal history.
And there you have it. We started out with those weird, maybe meaningless-seeming dreams, and we've taken quite a journey, haven't we? Deep into the hidden landscape of the mind. We've uncovered how Freud saw them as these powerful but disguised wish fulfillments. We've looked at how things like condensation, displacement, and the dream sensor shape our unconscious desires into those bizarre stories we experience every night.
Yeah, we've explored how even the dreams that feel bad, the anxiety dreams, the counter-wish dreams, are still, at their core, fulfilling some kind of repressed desire, just transforming it through these really complex psychic tricks. And we saw how symbolism, especially sexual symbolism, that often goes back to our earliest experiences, acts like this kind of universal code, hiding messages in plain sight.
So, understanding these mechanisms, even just a little bit, really gives you a powerful tool for, well, for self-insight, doesn't it? Your dreams aren't just random brain noise, they're potentially a language your deeper self is using to communicate. They can show you the hidden forces, those unconscious titans, influencing you even while you're asleep.
So maybe the next time you drift off to sleep, or when you wake up remembering some strange dream fragment, just consider this. If our dreams really do reveal that we are what we are because we have been what we have been, what hidden truths, what forgotten wishes or fears from your own past might your dreams be ready to share? That is, if you're willing to listen and maybe pay attention to those first unbidden associations that pop into your head.